Hello, I'm Peg Lane, special education teacher for students with dyslexia or emotional behavioral issues. I'm also a certified practitioner of psychodrama. And I have with me today a very special guest who is personally connected to psychodrama and sociodrama and sociometry, but she also has much experience in schools with teaching and using these methods. Miriam, how are you? Miriam Zachariah.
I am great. Thanks for that wonderful introduction, Peg. I have taught for about 20 years, from kindergarten to grade 8. I've taught special education, gym, and music. I have a master's in curriculum teaching and learning, and my thesis was actually on peacemaking circles, which was about creating professional communities among teachers and the methods that were used for that, which was really very much basically about groups. I've been a psychodrama trainer since 2007, as well as a certified practitioner. And my specialty really is on teaching the use of sociometry, which sociometry is really about the measurement of groups. It's about our connections, what draws us together and what can get in the way and push us apart. So how do we use that to resolve conflicts? How do we use that to reduce polarity? And as well, the use of sociodrama or enactment to teach certain concepts and help students understand deeply some of the things that we want them to learn. I learned a great deal of this, or began to learn a great deal of this, from my mother, who was a teacher for 47 years and used many of these methods in her classroom. She's the daughter of Jacob Moreno, who was the creator of psychodrama. She also learned much of this from her own mother, who was as well an educator and began to use sociometry with young groups of children very, very early in the days of the development of psychodrama in Beacon, New York. So I just wanted to go through three different ways that you can use sociometry, that is that measurement of groups, sociodrama and action methods, and conflict resolution. So first thing is that we always want to create a safe space for children to learn. Very important that children feel like they can take risks in their learning environment. They don't feel like they can take risks. If that's not a space where risk-taking is allowed, they're really going to struggle with learning. So I'm going to just use a specific example. I'm going to use some examples from really the same classroom that I worked in. It's a grade 7 and 8 classroom. In this classroom, there were between 52 and 56 students. I was obviously working with another colleague. She taught half the program, I taught the other half. We were in a very big room, so we were able to switch the kids back and forth between us very easily. There was basically a bookshelf in between. The very beginning of our class was always an opportunity really to start to build the group, to help the children make connections with each other, realize where they had things in common, realize where they were different, and begin to talk across and understand the differences between each other, as well as bond over those connections. So we started out every class, every opportunity with check-ins. So sometimes the check-ins were about their lives, sometimes it was about the things that they were about to learn. And those were opportunities for that to begin to happen. Usually early in October, sometimes late September, we would take these kids on a camping trip. And I mean camping. This was not like your regular outdoor education experience. This was camping with tents and sleeping bags and coolers full of food. They had to organize this themselves. One of the things we did was we ran two what we call sociometric tests. A sociometric test is simply an opportunity for every single person in the group to pick a criteria. In this case, the criteria was, who would you like to cook with and eat with? And the second criteria was, who would you like to sleep in a tent with? And you had to choose. We usually gave them 7 or 8 people that they could choose positively. In a sociometric test for adults, you often also give them the opportunity to say negative choices, kids they would never want to be with. We didn't do that with our kids because it complicated the formation of the groups a great deal. And it was also difficult when you were dealing with kids who sometimes would get left out. However, there was always a student or two students who had no mutual choices, meaning they chose other students, but no other students chose them. We had in particular one boy who was a student with autism, very, very bright young boy. He chose a group of girls, very, very self-possessed, strong, lots of social capital, popular girls. They sat with us, and this is what we did in a sociometric test. When we formed a group, we would take the group where there wasn't the mutual choice, and we would talk to the students who had not chosen this student, but he had chosen them. And we would work with him to talk about, why did you choose these girls? This is really important for them to know. And we would work with the group so they would listen to his choice, and then they would think about the reasons they might choose him as well. So off we went on this camping trip. This student, of course, like many children with autism, had a lot of sensory issues. One of the chores in your cooking group was having to do dishes. He didn't want to put his hands in the cold water. There was no heated water there. And the greasy dishes and the soap suds, it all distressed him. However, he didn't tell the girls that that's what distressed him. So when it was his turn to do dishes, he made a comment about how girls should be doing dishes anyway. Well, you can imagine how that was received by this group of girls. They were not happy at all. They were very up in arms about it. And of course, this was a social justice program, so they knew they were in the right, that girls should not be pigeonholed into doing dishes. We did, an encounter, what we call an encounter in psychodrama, what we call, conflict resolution in other places, where we sat the group together. He was able to say, defend his position. They were able to also talk about their experience. Now, what we did in this particular case, instead of having them actually role reverse, we had him paraphrase what he had heard them say. And when he was able to do that, he was able to really understand how the experience affected them. Also, when it got to the point, we asked a question which says, what were you thinking or feeling at the time when you made this comment? He was able to finally reveal his sensory challenge, and that it was really the sensory challenge that was making him not want to do the dishes. Once the girls heard that, then the kids were able to problem solve, and we found a pair of gloves for him to be able to do the dishes so that he didn't have to put his hands directly in the water. So after this, those girls became staunch defenders of this boy, who, because of his condition, right, because of the way his brain worked, continued to have difficulties, especially in early adolescence, so with social interaction with other students. And these girls were able to really begin to understand his perspective and help him navigate some of those challenges. In late October and November, what we do is we ask the children again to do another sociometric test. And this is the group that they're going to sit with in the classroom. So they had one group they sat with in math and science, and another group they sat with it for English, drama, and history and the arts. And we would, again, go through this process with the students. And one of the things that we said to them was that whatever group they sat with in either class, that was their group for the rest of the year. It was not going to change. And what we did in that process, because there was always conflict, at least in several of the groups, and often in one group more than others, the goal was, just like you can't leave your family, you can't leave your base group. So your base group has to become a place where you work through those conflicts and you work through those encounters. And that was that sociometry that helped them talk across some of those differences in perspective. right, that they would have. So the next thing I want to talk about is a curriculum application of our work in this classroom using action methods. We were a social justice classroom, so really our goal was really to educate children in lots of ways about social issues. One of the issues that the children brought up actually was the issue of hunger, right? Why were there people in a very, bustling North American, fairly well-to-do city with some social supports? Why were there still children going hungry? Why were people suffering with food insecurity? So we did some math to a lot of data management to help them explore whether hunger was because we didn't have enough food or because we didn't distribute the food well. They learned, of course, that hunger is a problem of distribution, not a problem of supply. We then had them experience the perspective of people who might have food insecurity, right? By researching different people who had that situation. What were some of the kinds of situations that would cause that food insecurity to happen? One of the math problems, for example, we did was they took the perspective of a worker in a Nike factory, and they did the math to figure out how many years it would take him to make the same amount of money that the CEO of Nike made in a year. If you projected backwards the number of years, dinosaurs would have been walking the earth at that time. So that was a real eye-opening experience for them, because there's a lot of blame, right, of people who struggle with food insecurity. One of the things they did was they began to do small sociodramas where they looked at what it was like to be an immigrant in a new country. How was that perspective different? So they would be the immigrant, they would be the border guards, they would be the people who were the social service people who were struggling to help those people. They would take the perspective of somebody who was working in a minimum wage job. They would take the perspective of somebody who had lost their job recently. This was all building up towards, and a sociodrama really is taking that perspective, and then once you have that role, unpacking your experience of the role and unpacking the learning that you got from the role. They then built towards leading a sociodrama themselves. The sociodrama is called The Hunger Banquet, and it is actually a sociodrama that's been developed by Oxfam Canada, which is an NGO here in Canada that works around the world with people who are struggling with various different kinds of social challenges, particularly women. They had developed this sociodrama as a way to educate adolescents. So the children ran the sociodrama. Part of it was creating the roles. So they themselves created the bios for all of these different roles. So every single person who came to the Hunger Banquet, and the community was invited, their parents along with other community members, they each paid $10 to come to this banquet. It's a fundraiser for Oxfam. And the children created all the roles. When a person came into the gym, which is where we had it, and this was not just my class, it was all the grade 7 and 8s in the school were working on this together. They gave them a card with a little description of who they were, their name, and what their circumstance was. They were an immigrant, they were a taxi driver, they just lost their job, they had 4 kids, whatever the situation was. They had some basic bio information. They came into the gym. 60% of those people were given a spot on gym mats. They had to sit on gym mats. 20% of them got to sit on chairs, and 10% of them got to sit at tables that had tablecloths and flowers and were fully set. The tables were food, the food that came to the tables was a full meal, and it was served to them by the students. The people who sat on the mats got rice. The people who sat on the chairs got rice and beans, and they got it buffet style at 2 different stations. Some of the children were enrolled as border guards. their job was prevent the people from mats from going and sitting on the chairs or at the tables. They wore, you know, kind of those crossing guard vests and the whole thing. Some of the children were up at the front, and their job was going to be to facilitate the sociodrama. So the sociodrama was enacted. Everyone ate their food, had their experience of who they were. We told them that they were in role as these people. Sometimes a set of parents would come together, and one parent would be in one part of the gym and one parent would be in the other part of the gym. And their children often with them as well. And the children would go with one parent and not with the other parent. After the meal, the children then got the opportunity to change things a little bit. So they would say, oh, you know, you won the lottery. You got like $100,000 in the lottery. You get to move to the table and sit there. Oh, you had, you know, Raphael, can you stand up? You had this really nice job, and so you were doing okay. And so that's why you're sitting in the chairs, and you just recently lost the job. Or there was another situation where somebody's, you know, mother got sick and they had to spend a lot of money taking care of their mother. And so they lost some privilege there. So we had several people lose privilege and one or two people gain it. And then we ask questions, the children ask questions of the audience to help them. The sociodrama ended and they asked questions to help them process their experience in role. And then we asked them what they had learned about poverty and about hunger and food insecurity. And the experience of the kids, while I'm still, you know, involved with some of those families, most of those students never forgot that experience. And the experience that they had of understanding the issues related to hunger and food insecurity never changed. In fact, many of those students continue to be activists today. I like to think partly because of that experience that they had. There was 100% engagement from those kids who you had trouble getting to school, kids who you had trouble finishing their work, staying focused in class. All of those kinds of students, I didn't find those issues with those kids during those types of units that we did. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was conflict resolution and how we manage conflict resolution in a classroom where we were working really deliberately with the sociometry. So all of our students were used to sitting in circle with each other all of the time and having conversations in circle. Simple conversations where you had one word or a small answer, more complex conversations where there was much more dialogue. This was a regular practice. Once a week, we asked the students, all 52 students, to come together in a circle. We moved all of the furniture so that there was enough space for everybody to sit on a chair. And we were in a big circle in one side of the classroom. We had a problem box that sat on my desk, and any kid at any time could write an issue that was occurring in the classroom and put it in the problem box. At the beginning, my teaching partner and myself, we pulled the issues out of the problem box, or it took a while for them to warm up to it. We dealt with issues that we knew were problems for them. We taught them how to present a problem, how to ask questions to help people dig into what the underlying issue of a problem might be, how to help everybody in the group understand all the perspectives in the issue, all the different stakeholder positions, and then how to look at those stakeholder positions and figure out what would be the way we could make the best possible solution that would meet everybody's needs. So one example, and what we did is we trained the kids eventually to facilitate these conversations. So by November, we were no longer the facilitators. There was a rotating group of facilitators, and the kids basically went through a list, and that was their turn to be facilitators. They picked the problem and they solved it. So an example that we had was, we had, like many classrooms, a certain amount of outdoor equipment that was given to the kids to play with. At some point, we got down to one basketball. Who knows what happened to the second basketball? But there was one basketball, and the boys were monopolizing this basketball. In fact, a certain set of boys were monopolizing this basketball. And the students were feeling very much like this wasn't fair. The girls in particular felt that this wasn't fair. And they felt like when they tried to join the game with the boys who were playing, their skill level wasn't good enough so that they could participate effectively. They just ended up getting sidelined. So they brought this issue forward and had a conversation. And what we realized is there was actually a little bit of a divide between the girls and the boys in the classroom and the athletes and the non-athletes in the classroom. So the solution to the problem was that they would work together on a car wash to fundraise enough money to buy more basketballs. As well, they would also, the kids who were stronger in basketball would dedicate some time at recess and in gym class to teach the kids who didn't do basketball as well. There was also an agreement that some of the recesses would be dedicated to just the kids who had trouble playing. And if the other kids wanted to participate, they could participate only as coaches. So that was, an example of how we use that problem-solving approach to build some of those relationships across some of those differences, to help children change places with each other and understand these varying perspectives. I did many, many things over my course as an educator, but those are some of the examples of the ways that sociometry and sociodrama can make a safe classroom. They can give students a deep, deep understanding of the types of things that they're needing to learn in language, in math, in geography, as well as a safe space to do that learning.
Thank you, Miriam. We've talked about following up this kind of general look at some of the main procedures from sociodrama and sociometry. And maybe we'll follow up with a few of the other ideas we've talked about. Thank you for this so much. Very wonderful, successful strategies for teachers to use. And we'll see you again.
Yes. Bye.
Bye-bye.